It has been strange watching the mood around the Miami Dolphins twist in ways nobody expected. A few weeks ago, the whole building felt like a hallway where someone had turned off the lights and decided not to warn anyone. Everything sounded uncertain. Every comment carried an echo. Mike McDaniel looked like a man the organization had quietly placed in the corner, waiting for the moment someone would tap him on the shoulder and say his time was up. People kept assuming his job was drifting away, slipping through the cracks created when the front office fractured and Chris Greer walked out of the picture. That's how it looked on the outside. But the inside, something else was happening. 3 wins. 3 wins at the exact moment everyone assumed this team was heading straight into a long, bleak stretch of aimless football. 3 wins in the middle of a storm of speculation that tried to turn McDaniel into a symbol of instability. It is strange how winning shifts the air around a team. The Dolphins are still sitting at 4-7. Nobody is pretending they're climbing any graphic that matters. But does that even tell the full truth? It never does. There's a tone shift in the way the players carry themselves, the way the sideline breathes. You can sense it without having someone spell it out. McDaniel walked into Miami, delivering something the franchise hadn't held in its hands for more than 2 decades, consecutive playoff berths. 2 years in a row. That alone changed the way people spoke about him. Even last season, when Tua Tagovailoa missed 6 games and the offense sputtered in ways that made fans grind their teeth, McDaniel still dragged the team to 8-9 and kept them alive longer than most coaches could have in that chaos. People downplayed that part. It's always easier to poke at the flaws than admit how many fires someone had to put out. But from the offseason into the early weeks of this year, rumors kept scratching at the surface. Something about the structure. Something about the relationships. Something about patience wearing thin. McDaniel entered the season standing on ground that felt warm enough to make anyone shift their weight. And yet, instead of breaking under it, he's been turning everything back toward him. Maybe gradually, maybe unevenly, but unmistakably. Stephen Ross still sees something in him. Something he isn't ready to abandon. That sentiment sits quietly in the background, but it's there, shaping how this whole scenario might unfold. Ross wants McDaniel to succeed. He wants to believe the coach can keep pushing this roster forward. There's talk that keeping him through 2026 is becoming more than a possibility. That alone changes how everyone inside the building will behave moving forward. And if that happens, imagine the dynamic. A new general manager walking in, inheriting a head coach who already carries both leverage and pressure. It is not a simple combination. The success McDaniel has drawn out of Tua matters more than most people admit. It doesn't erase the frustration, or the ups and downs, or the long list of questions hanging above Tua's head every single season. But it does show something. McDaniel knows how to build a quarterback up, knows how to create an environment where the passer isn't collapsing under the weight of expectation. Tua has hit milestones that once felt out of reach. Led the league in yards per attempt. Led it in passing yards. Led it in completion percentage. 3 different years, 3 different categories. That doesn't happen by mistake. But numbers never tell the full story, and everyone knows it. This season, his QBR sitting down in the 20s isn't flattering. It gives his critics more to shout about. It fuels the idea that the Dolphins have tied themselves to a quarterback who may never fully break free from inconsistency. And yet, if McDaniel manages to guide Tua through a strong finish, even after all the turbulence, that might weigh heavily in the final decision. The organization is financially tied to him. His guaranteed salary in 2026 isn't easy to move. They're locked to each other, whether everyone likes it or not. What does that mean for McDaniel's future? If he gets Tua trending upward when the season felt like it was sinking, doesn't that count for something? Doesn't that force the front office to rethink the narrative they allowed to grow earlier in the year? It's hard to ignore success when it shows up at the exact moment doubt is trying to take over. There's also the matter of the coaching landscape. Next year's pool is crowded with defensive-minded candidates. Names like Vance Joseph, Chris Shula, Jeff Hafley, Jesse Minter, Robert Saleh. All of them carrying different strengths, different levels of appeal, different ideas of how to stabilize a franchise. But offensive-minded candidates? The list looks thinner. Joe Brady, Cliff Kingsbury. Both intriguing. Both respected. neither riding the type of momentum that would automatically push McDaniel aside. If Ross looks around and sees that McDaniel is still the most convincing offensive leader available, wouldn't that tilt the balance toward keeping him? If McDaniel were to be fired after this season, he wouldn't disappear. He wouldn't be drifting around waiting for a call. Someone would scoop him up fast. He'd be plugged into an offense as a coordinator before the ink on his release paperwork dried. And Ross knows that. Everyone knows that. It complicates the conversation in a way that isn't easy to overlook. And yet, none of this tells the whole story. Because there's still the question nobody wants to say too loudly. Is this team willing to pair a new GM with a head coach he didn't choose? That kind of mismatch has gone wrong for plenty of franchises. When the GM and coach aren't fully aligned, the cracks show. They grow. They create problems that turn small disagreements into full-blown fractures. Teams these days are avoiding that scenario at all costs. They want symmetry. They want alignment. They want partnership. Installing McDaniel alongside a fresh GM creates a fragile balance that could tip in any direction. McDaniel's contract already runs through 2028, not just 2026. Extending him wasn't a small gesture. It was a commitment. But commitments don't mean much in the NFL unless wins line up behind them. So the question grows louder. Does the organization value what McDaniel has built enough to let him continue shaping it? Or is the lure of a clean slate too tempting? The uncertainty sits right in the middle, and no one has managed to push it aside. Meanwhile, the team itself keeps shifting between promise and frustration. Every game turns into a new test of how much McDaniel can squeeze out of this roster. Every drive becomes evidence for or against him. The players still fight for him. You can see it in the way they celebrate on the sideline, in the way they rally behind each other when the offense finally finds rhythm. They haven't checked out. They haven't drifted. They haven't shown signs of a locker room waiting for the season to end. That alone says something. Tyreek Hill's arrival in 2022 reshaped the offense. Everyone agrees on that. His presence gives Tua a layer of certainty he never had before. But that doesn't erase McDaniel's role. It's the combination that made the offense breathe. Without the schemes, without the timing, without McDaniel's insistence on creating spacing that makes defenses panic, Tyreek's impact wouldn't feel as explosive. And without Tyreek, McDaniel's system would have taken longer to settle into place. Both perspectives hold weight, and both feed into the larger conversation about the coach's value. So what now? What happens if the season ends with Miami's record looking like a mess, but the energy looking like a revival? What happens if they string together just enough wins to make the final stretch uncomfortable for the front office? Does momentum matter more than math? Does belief outweigh frustration? Or do the Dolphins decide they've reached the limit of what this setup can accomplish? That's the puzzle sitting in front of everyone. A coach who refuses to fold, a quarterback who keeps swinging between brilliance and doubt, an owner who wants stability but also wants results, and a front office preparing for a reset it didn't plan to make in the middle of the season. It feels like everything is suspended in the air, just waiting for the next shift. And maybe that's the strange part. Nothing about this moment feels settled. Nothing feels locked in. Nothing feels predictable. The Dolphins could keep McDaniel and watch him build something that finally clicks the way he envisioned when he arrived. Or they could make a cut that reshapes the entire identity of the franchise. Both futures feel close enough to touch. But the decision isn't here yet. The season still has breath left in it. And as long as it does, McDaniel keeps pushing, keeps fighting, keeps trying to prove that he belongs in the chair everyone assumed he was already halfway out of.